What's up, YouTube? The incoming collapse is not that far away. In fact, we're just some months away from it happening. And I'm going to talk about the 5 things I'm watching that are telling me and giving me signals that it's sooner than later. And I want to share these 5 things with you and a couple of charts so you can visually see what I'm talking about. You know, we can't live in a fishbowl and pretend things that are going around outside of us don't really matter. In fact, they have huge, profound impacts to the choices that we're going to make in the next couple of years. So why don't we take a look at these 5 things. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the economy itself and the manufacturing PMI index going down. And if we look at the latest, this just came out a couple of days ago. And if we look at this, it's telling us that the manufacturing sector contracted in August for the 5th consecutive month. And here's the 21st time in the last 22 months. Just take a moment and understand what that means. The manufacturing, so making stuff, has contracted in the US 21 times out of the last 22 months. This is a sign that things are not going well. There's no way that with the manufacturing contracting month after month after month for that long, that there is not going to be an impending impact to the broader economy. Now, if we take that one step further and look at the leading indicators. So leading indicators are things that project what's going to happen in the future. It's a predictor, not a lagging indicator, which is kind of looking backwards. And these leading indicators are showing us that we are way down and have been down for some time. And if you look at in the past 2 decades, what happened? Well, whenever the leading indicators went down, we had what? We had a recession, which are represented in these gray bars. And so we've been down here and we stay down and we're about to come up. And that's usually when we're going to have a recession. And these leading indicators include things such as, building permits, new orders from the Institute of Supply Chain Management, and things that kind of foretell what economic activity will be like going ahead. And that is a clear signal that there is downward pressure. And there has been downward pressure. It hasn't just started. This has been going on for a while. That's been accumulated. And so that is also a clear signal that economic activity around construction, manufacturing is slowing down and has been slowing down for some time now. Now, the second thing we need to talk about is essentially what's going on with the consumer. Because you might say, hey, the US doesn't make anything anymore. We're a consumer spending driven economy. Okay, fine. That has some merit to it. So let's look at what's going on with the consumer. When you look at this is the Beige Book, which the Fed releases. And in the very latest Beige Book in August, they say that consumer spending has ticked down in most districts. The consumer is not spending as much anymore. And the reason is they're not feeling like they have the capacity to spend on discretionary items because of what happened with inflation and the fact that wage growth hasn't increased along with the inflation. The other thing I also look at here is credit card delinquencies, because one of the first things that happens when consumers get hit is they start getting late on their payments. Now, unlike mortgage payments, credit card monthly payments, they tend to not pay when things get tight because they can try to catch up and they can fix their credit score later. It's not a huge thing like losing your house. And so that's an indicator to me of something that's very clear about what the consumer finances is like at home. And when you look at this, this is the latest insight that was produced by the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia back in July. And in here, you'll see that 60 plus days past due, it's at an all-time high. We have to go back almost a decade and we surpassed that. So it's very clear here that the consumer is tapped out. And you see all these headlines about dollar stores closing and a lot of the retailers having issues and giving downward guidance going forward, which hits their stock price. It is clear to me that the consumer is tapped out. Which then brings us to the third thing, which is the labor market. Now, the labor market, you got to understand, they've been playing games with the data, and that's because it's an election year. And the latest game they played was they reduced the Labor Department reduced the last by 818,000. To put that into perspective, they're basically saying, oh, by the way, the number of jobs created, or we thought was created, was actually, we were off by 30%, 30%. We overshot by 30. We didn't actually create 30% of the jobs we told you that month. So this is a game they play. They give a good number, and then months later, when nobody's watching, they just revise it down. They've been playing this game now for many years, in fact. And the last year, they've been revising down like 95% of the time. But this one was, the latest one was really bad. I mean, you can't be off by 30%, right? Like, in what job in America where if you're in charge of some statistic and you're off by 30%, you get fired? But here we are. And so it is clear that the labor market is not as healthy as they've been projecting. They keep playing this revised downward games. But the last one, 30%, I mean, come on, man. Let's move on to the employment rate, which is another thing that they also fiddle around with, because there's this, like, you know, based on the birth-death model, they can manipulate like how many people enter the job force to change the percent of unemployed, basically. But even with that, you can see here, it's gone up, right? Like, it's been steadily going up, and it's been shooting up. Now, today is Thursday, and so tomorrow they're going to release the monthly, you know, unemployment data. And I don't know what it's going to be, and you know, I don't know what shenanigans are going to play, but it doesn't really matter because clearly the trend is up here. And so the labor market is definitely weakening, and that means there's going to be more job losses on the way. And that's something that we all should be very careful about, because that might come straight to you, right? Now, once we get into that, we got to ask, well, the stock market's at an all-time high or near the all-time high. And that is true. The stock market is near the all-time high. But let me ask you, who's selling and who's buying? It's very clear that the smart money is getting the heck out of the stock market. Smart money being like all the big banks and institutional managers. And who are they selling it to? They're selling it to the retail folks, the bag holders, or what we call the dumb money. You know, people like me, like people who invest, like, you know, from their house and stuff. As far as smart money goes, I mean, I can pull all kinds of charts, but let's just take a look at the guy, the Oracle from Omaha, right? Which is Warren Buffett. And what has this guy been doing? This guy has sold off a ton of everything he owns in the stock market. He sold off half like his Apple shares. He's sitting on so much cash. He hasn't had this much cash since I don't know when, right? And you got to wonder, why is basically the smartest guy in the investment world selling everything and building a stockpile of cash? Could it be because he thinks that things are going to get down and he can buy stuff on the cheap, and that's why he needs cash? He's done this many times before. That is why he is one of the richest men in the world. And Berkshire Hathaway is the only non-tech trillion-dollar company in the planet, right? So the question is, okay, fine, all the smart money is selling, but who's buying? And if you look at the data, well, it's retail. That's who's buying, the dumb money. We're thinking like, oh, the stock market's always going to go off, so every time it dips, they sell and we buy. They've been doing this all the time. And look, the last time it reached this level was what? 2000, when we had the dot-com bubble burst. That was painful. Well, here we are again. So it's clear to me out here that the dumb money is basically digging themselves into a huge grave hole, and the smart money knows what's coming, right? These are the masters of the universe. They know what's going to be happening, and they've been selling to the dumb money, right? And that's why the stock market is near all-time high. Okay, let's see how this ends. Now, the final thing, the fifth thing I wanted to leave you all with is the yield curve is uninverting. And it's uninverting because of what they call a bull steepener, which means the reason why it's uninverting is because the interest rates are going to be dropping, which the Fed will be doing come September 18, after keeping it high for a while, which is exactly what happened in '07 and '08. And if you remember what happened in '07, '08, those of you who are 40 years old and above, it was a painful, painful experience with many people losing their jobs. Now you got to take this seriously. And so what's happening now? Well, we literally just inverted the other day. We intraday went above zero, right? So basically when you go below zero, that triggers a warning. And then when you go above it, that's when the recession happens. And we literally just had an intraday move above zero the other day. So what does that mean? That means the recession is coming. Look, every time this has happened, the gray bar happened. The gray bar is what? A recession. We had a COVID recession that was really quick because they freaking pumped and printed so much money. It was like giving, a huge shot of cocaine to the economy. We had the '07, '08 Great Recession. We had the Y2K bubble. I mean, every time this has happened, we've had a recession. And so now we even can calculate, since the uninversion, when did the recession start? And we'll see, the lag, right? There is a lag. And so the question is, how many days this time around, right? I will say it's probably, none of this lagged more than a year. And I would say this time it may lag actually less because we've been uninverted for so long here. And we've been uninverted much more than any time in the past, except probably the Great Depression, 1928, 29. So what does that mean? That means next year we will be having a recession. Just look at this data, right? Don't try to argue. This is decades and decades worth of data with 100% accuracy rate. Things are not different this time around. You're not old enough to know this. I'm not old enough. I wasn't alive back in, I was alive, but I wasn't working in 1990. I was still in high school. But I was there for the '07, '08 recession and also the year 2000 dot-com bust. And those are, I can't tell you how many people I saw getting axed, right? Didn't get a job and basically had to sell a lot of things out. And so that's coming. That's coming next year. And so what we need to do is continue to monitor these things and start getting prepared. And that means moving your finance in a way that it can withstand these shocks, and also having diversity in your income stream so you're not reliant on a single corporate job. And if you're doing a startup, understand that, the recession is not the time to actually, scale out and go to the market. It's actually the time to do product development and product build, right? And acquiring assets at huge discounts that you won't ever get again for maybe another decade. And we'll talk a little bit about more on those topics in upcoming episodes, and basically how to leverage the recession to your advantage. But anyway, look, it's clear what's going on. Don't listen to all the mainstream media and all the pundits. They'll talk. These are the people who said there was not going to be inflation or that it was transitory. Look, listen just to the data and the statistics, right? Look, I think we're going to have a very tough September, and we'll probably rebound and perhaps even make new all-time highs in the stock market until the end of the year as the election runs up, if they can hold it that long. And then once the election completes and we have a new president in place next year, that's when things will begin to unravel rather quickly. And I wouldn't write off a financial accident or crisis or two along the way. And that will get very, very tricky for us to navigate through. So having said that, I hope you take some of this information and think about it yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.